You're Henry Ford in 1919, just 16 years after founding Ford Motor Company. In addition to launching the Model A, you also released the groundbreaking Model T in 1908. The success with the launch of this car was so great that you were forced to halt sales because you didn't have the production capacity for so many orders. To revolutionize this and make history, you visited a slaughterhouse and found a linear system for processing cattle, enabling large-scale production. Visionary as you were, you did this in your business starting in 1913. Your Model T, once taking 12.5 hours to build, was now fully assembled in just an hour and a half. Now, besides having made the car a product for the masses, you wanted to expand worldwide. The millions of sales in the United States were not enough for your ambition. And probably you agree with the saying that goes, the early bird gets the worm. In 1919, you launched Ford's operations in Brazil, becoming the country's first car manufacturer. But 102 years later, the company you founded shocks Brazilians with the following announcement.
The Brazilian automotive industry suffered a historic blow today as the automaker Ford announced the end of vehicle production in the country.
Yeah, the news of the factory closures was terrible, because the departure of a giant company like Ford caused a loss of 8,000 jobs throughout the entire production chain. But that's not all. What are the risks of other automakers leaving our country? Who is at fault, Ford, which lost market share, or the Brazilian government?
Ford announced it is leaving Brazil. That's 5,000 jobs. What does the press do? OGLOBO front page, poor business climate, Ford exits Brazil. They wanted to renew car production subsidies for sales. Now there's competition too. Chinese, right? Among others. So it closed down because in the business world, when you don't make a profit, you shut down.
Leaving all this noise behind, let's really understand in this video the real reason why Ford left Brazil.
Announced today that it will end car production in Brazil.
To save the lives of thousands and thousands of young Americans.
Despite Japan having its infrastructure in the country destroyed and having been the target of 2 atomic bombs at the end of World War II, it was from there that the world's largest car manufacturer was born. In the 1960s and 1970s, the Fordist production model was called into question. Toyota, inspired by Fordism, innovated its production model, which would come to be known as Toyotism. Unlike the American model, the Japanese model revolutionized the way cars were made by focusing on quality and variety of models. No excesses. Toyota was dedicated to not keeping high inventories. The relationship between workers was different, and auto parts suppliers were decentralized. In short, the Japanese company Toyota, with this innovation, has since become the largest brand in the automotive sector in the world. With a 10.5% market share, Ford ranks fourth with a 5% share. And what's interesting here is that a manufacturer that was founded just a few years ago, more precisely in 2003, is currently the most valuable brand in the automotive sector. Overrated or not, Tesla in October 2021 was valued at $1 trillion. It alone, at the values of that time, was worth more than the 10 largest vehicle manufacturers in the world combined. Understanding this is crucial, as Tesla sparked a revolution in cars. But now, in the way cars are going to be powered, the future is the electrification of engines, whether they're hybrid or not. The manufacturers are absorbing this, and structural changes are happening. In 2020, Ford sold 4.5 million vehicles worldwide, 2.3 million in North America, including 2 million in the United States. Europe was another large market with 1 million vehicles sold, while China had 600,000. Its global subsidiaries have caused heavy losses for the parent company, $500 million in South America and over $800 million in Europe. In China, losses are about 500 million, with over 100 million lost in all other markets combined. Like General Motors, Ford barely sells passenger cars now. The focus of the two American automakers is on pickup trucks and SUVs, which are more profitable categories and are much more sold in the country where they were born. This vehicle type made up 77% of all United States sales in 2021. Ford leads this sector with its F-150, the best-selling vehicle in the United States for over 40 years. So yes, we can say that Ford is not failing in Brazil because we are the worst country in the world to sell cars. This industry has become extremely competitive. Ford has already abandoned its operations in Australia. In Japan, General Motors Ford can't even compete. In 2021, Ford also closed its factories in India, and in China, which is the world's largest vehicle producer, it's not even in the top 10 in market share. Okay, but that's the global scenario. How much is Brazil to blame for Ford leaving?
Brazil is now entering an extraordinary phase of development. Its immense continental size is being crossed by roads that connect Brazilian land in all directions. Industries are developing at an extraordinary pace. The steel industry, the automobile industry, and now the pioneering movement that is shaking the entire nation is bringing to the heart of Brazil a center of culture and civilization, which will be tomorrow the new capital of Brazil, Brasilia.
Although Ford entered Brazil in 1919, the Brazilian automotive industry only truly began to emerge here starting in the 1950s. To boost the birth of this industry, there was no shortage of development programs. The first was the executive group of the automotive industry, with President Juscelino Kubitschek in 1956. All of them had a single goal: to finance vehicle production, attracting multinational companies with tax benefits and financing.
Mercedes-Benz Brazil produces 3 types of excellent vehicles. Besides the bus, there are 2 trucks, one light and the other medium weight. The quality of the 3 types produced is identical to that achieved in Germany.
About 4,000 sets of connecting rod and cap are machined daily. Brazil, with Ford Taubaté, received in terms of industrial technological investment the most modern advancements in the world.
The fact is that it worked. The automotive industry was indeed born in Brazil, but it developed towards its own demise. Currently, our automotive industry faces this situation. We have 21 motor vehicle manufacturers, including cars, pickups, vans, trucks and buses, plus 5 more for agricultural and road machinery. All these 26 manufacturers are spread across Brazil in 57 industrial units. Brazil's domestic market boomed from 2003 to 2013, peaking in production and sales at 3.7 million units. In 2021, our industry produced 2 million, 1.5 million less than the peak in 2013. But what explains this drop in production? The coronavirus, right? Wrong. Looking at 2019, a year before the COVID crisis, our country produced 2.9 million units, 800,000 units less than in 2013. The fact is that from 2013 onwards, Brazil saw its production go into a full decline. So actually, understanding Ford's exit from our country is really about understanding our country's failure towards industrialization. Our automotive industry can now produce nearly 5 million units annually. But there's a major issue. Brazil has never used its full production capacity and has almost always operated below capacity. Underproducing causes losses. We haven't been competitive enough to manufacture and export cars globally. Manufacturers rely heavily on the domestic market for profit. The 2015 and 2016 crisis with negative gross domestic product growth worsened the situation. No doubt the tax burden is a major villain in our country. The challenge is so significant that a World Bank study found a medium-sized company in Brazil spends about 2,000 hours simply calculating and paying taxes. Elsewhere, the average is just 160 hours. In Brazil's automotive sector, 30–40% of a new car's price is taxes. While in the United States, it's around 7%. But don't be fooled. The reason Ford left the country is a much deeper issue than it seems. Although Ford was the first manufacturer in our country, it never launched a successful car in Brazil. From 1959 to 1982, the Fusca was the best-selling car in Brazil for 24 consecutive years. In 1983, it was Chevrolet's turn with the Chevette.
Chevrolet presents the perfect integration of mechanics and style. The new Chevette. gasoline or ethanol engine, now also a 1.6 new transmission with optional fifth gear.
And from 84 to 86, Chevrolet stayed on the podium, but this time with the Monza.
Monza, this is the car of the year. Power steering, electric windows, and optional fifth gear, style and aerodynamics for performance with economy.
In 1987, Volkswagen outdid everyone with the famous Gol, which remained the best-selling car in the country for 27 years. Fiat took the lead with the Palio in 2014. From 2015 on, Chevrolet regained first place with the Onix, maintaining strong competition with the Hyundai HB20. This graph shows how fierce the competition was for Ford in our country, as its market share dropped below 10% from 2003 until it exited. Fiat with Jeep, Chevrolet, and Volkswagen lead with 59% market share, while other brands each have under 10%. China is the largest global automobile market, with 26 million cars and light commercial vehicles produced in 2021. But things weren't always like this. The United States, from the beginning of the 20th century until now, has almost always been the world's largest vehicle producer. Most economists agree that rich countries are industrialized. Brazil made a lot of mistakes in its industrialization policies, especially in the automotive industry. It could have followed the example of Asian countries like India and China, which opened their markets to multinationals, but with requirements for counterparts. China, for example, required foreign manufacturers to enter the country only if they agreed to a 50-50 partnership. This agreement required multinationals to form joint ventures with Chinese companies, benefiting China's economy by enabling technology transfer. The same thing happened in India in the 90s. In our country, however, the liberalization of the market for foreign manufacturers killed our national industry. China and India have notable national brands like Chery and Tata Motors because they opened their markets but continued to strengthen domestic industries. Chinese brands experienced a great rise and, in 2021, held 44% of the share in the ultra-competitive Chinese market, which has more than 80 brands. In India, Suzuki, a Japanese brand, held almost 50% of the Indian market for a long time after being one of the first brands to make a deal with an Indian automaker, Maruti. China and India are more competitive internationally than Brazil, exporting many more units worldwide. Our policy to build an automotive industry relied on subsidies for multinationals that grew dependent on a domestic market with low demand. The formula for failure was created, and the ones who suffer the most are us, Brazilians. There is a great risk that one day this could collapse and several other brands could leave our country. The future of the automotive industry is indeed moving toward electric vehicles, whether hybrid or not. That is the way forward. It's no coincidence that Tesla is the most valuable car manufacturer in the world. However, the industry's future here is highly uncertain. We don't have any national manufacturers, in fact we do, but only for specific segments, like Agrale, which makes trucks and tractors. We're the only Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa nation without a national car brand. Some national producers tried to succeed in this sector, but they either went bankrupt or were bought out. One of the most famous was Gurgel, founded in 1969 by mechanic and electrician João Augusto Conrado do Amaral Gurgel. The Brazilian Gurgel could have been the prelude to our own Henry Ford. In fact, he had revolutionary ideas and even tried to launch electric cars in the 70s. The same thing happened with Troller, another 100% Brazilian manufacturer that was bought by Ford in 2007, which basically killed the brand. Another issue is that, despite having national suppliers, Brazil imports far more auto parts than it exports. The automakers have their suppliers spread all over the world and prefer to import, especially after the government made it easier to import auto parts that don't exist here in the country. In the 1990s, Metal Leve, a Brazilian company and auto parts supplier, held 80% of the market share. However, it went bankrupt due to the dollar-real parity, which allowed foreign manufacturers to import auto parts. Those that survived were acquired by multinationals. Brazil could have learned from India and China, which, when opening their markets, combined business with pleasure by opening their economies and supporting growth of fully domestic car manufacturers and auto parts companies. South Korea is another example of a country that improved financing policies to support its national manufacturer Hyundai. The same thing happened with Toyota, which started as a textile machine manufacturer and was ridiculed for selling poor quality cars in the North American market. Ultimately, that became the world's largest car manufacturer. Mainly due to support from the Japanese government, which once saved the company from bankruptcy with a public loan. The partial or gradual opening of the market allowed China and India to absorb technological innovations to foster their own national industries. This way, they reduced their external dependence a bit. It's not that you shouldn't open the market, the problem is opening it without having a strong national domestic industry. In short, we can say that we were deindustrialized. Brazil fully embraced liberalism, and this is what happened. Proof of this is that currently, auto parts suppliers are divided into two categories. The system suppliers, or Tier 1, are mainly 7 multinational companies. Bosch is the most well-known, while Tier 2 refers to national suppliers. 75% of the suppliers' revenue is in the hands of foreign-owned companies, and 25% is under national capital control. The fact is that there have been years of mistakes, and the solution is not simple, it's complex. The main path would be measures to encourage and absorb our own technologies, without depending so much on foreign automakers, who only want subsidies to send their profits to their international headquarters. Unfortunately, that's the game, and the rich countries own the biggest companies and the most advanced technologies, the most patents, and it will be hard to compete without strengthening our own industry. Only then can we become a richer, more competitive country, not just a commodity exporter. Industrial policy doesn't guarantee results. But looking at all the countries that have climbed the ladder of technological development and currently produce highly complex products, all of them implemented industrial policy. This is clear when you look at countries like South Korea, Japan, China, Taiwan, Singapore, and even the United States. A clear and simple example of industrial policy is the national goal of exports and technological upgrading, in which the government assists the private sector but requires these counterparts. Industrial policy is a tool used with the private sector against developed countries that already control key technologies. The free market failed to make Brazil competitive in the industrial sector. Finance Minister Pedro Malan said in the 1990s that no industrial policy is the best industrial policy. Anyway, it turned out the way it did. China has become a powerhouse today, threatening American hegemony precisely because it did the opposite. While Brazil and Latin American countries are still very dependent on commodity exports. The International Monetary Fund, which later promoted liberal policies in Latin America, admitted it was wrong to recommend economic austerity and market liberalization, claiming that these measures do not produce results in underdeveloped countries and in fact increase inequality. A free market is good for already developed countries, which buy commodities and export highly technological products at a lower cost to peripheral economies. Talking about the so-called failure of Ford in Brazil is actually talking about Brazil's failure to develop a national industry with highly competitive companies in the international scenario. There are exceptions like Embraer and WEG, but as Baster says, exceptions are examples for fools. But I confess that when I set out to make this video, I didn't expect to have to conclude that Brazil, unfortunately, is not on the path to development. I want to know your opinion and your view on this subject. That's what the comments are for. Subscribe to the channel if you liked it, leave a like. If you didn't like it, make sure to click the dislike button twice. Hugs, and see you in the next video.